Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my favorite books of 2021. This year definitely felt like the year of, do I like reading? Do I actually like reading? It doesn't feel like I do. One, I just didn't read as many books as I normally do. I didn't always feel in the mood to read books, like a lot. Overall, I would say while there were a couple really good standouts, most of the books I read were like 4 stars. Like, just so many books could not reach that 5-star for me. And even some of those 5 stars, I'm like, they're not like my favorite books of all time. Like, they're really good and they did what they needed to, and I really liked them in the moment, but have I thought about them since? So maybe those books don't even need to be 5 stars. I don't know anymore. But we're going to talk about my top 10 books, and it was actually really hard to make a top 10 list because there were so many books that just were not my favorite. But let us get started. We are going in order, so I will start off with Loveless by Alice Oseman. So Loveless is a contemporary story, probably young adult, but it is about a girl in her first year of college, and it is about her figuring out herself, what she wants to do, and that she is aro ace, or on the aro ace spectrum, and what that kind of means for what she wants in relationships and what she wants in life. This book wasn't perfect. I gave it a 4-star. It definitely had its flaws. It had things that I wish it would have talked about more and wish it would have done differently, but overall this was just a really validating read for me, and I think that the discussions that this book had, it did it really well in a way that would be accessible to somebody that does not experience these feelings. It felt really good to read this book and to have someone with similar thoughts and experiences to me. Not all the same, because again, aro ace is a spectrum, but overall this was really lovely to read, and it's definitely a book I wish I would have had when I was that age. It would have made a world of difference. My number 9 pick for this is Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About the Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. And this is a nonfiction book mainly talking about ace identities. It talks a little bit about aromanticism, but I think it's mostly about asexuality. I read this close to the beginning of the year, so I'm trying to remember it. It does a bunch of different discussion topics about what it means to be ace, talking with the community, talking with members, what it's like, that experience, and then it delves into like what this means about society, how we think about sex, how we think about sex in society, all these kind of things. So there are a lot of interesting discussions in this book, and again, it was really validating to read this, to read so many different experiences, to see where people differ from me and where people are the same as me. It was just a really great to read something like this, and it is definitely a book I would highly recommend to people that want to know more about ace and aro ace identities. I wouldn't say like I learned something completely new, but it was nice to think about things in a different way, and just to like think about how society really is formed around sex, especially American society. So yes, a really great nonfiction, highly recommend. For my number 8th spot, I have Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley, and this is a YA mystery thriller story about a young girl who lives on a reservation, an indigenous girl who lives on a reservation, just kind of her trials and tribulations, growing up, figuring out what she wants to do, and while all this is going on, her community is experiencing a really big drug problem, and the FBI comes in to investigate, and she might get wrapped up into that investigation. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 stars. It wasn't quite like my new favorite book of all time, but I think about this book a lot, and there was so much that I loved about this book. I really just loved the internal, about the characters, about their situations. I loved the main character in her community. The thriller plot aspect was really interesting too. It really kept me on the edge of my seat, to the point where I didn't even think about like who could actually be the one doing this, which is not normal for me. But I was like even more invested in just like the main character living her day-to-day life, and I really just loved that. So this was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. It was a really fun read, and I really hope that this author writes more, because I loved her writing. I loved what she did with the story. I think she could write even more amazing pieces, because this was an amazing debut. The next book I have on here is the Dragon Tapestry, which is the 3rd and final concluding comic book in the Dragon Society series, and this one just really stuck home to me. I really love the Dragon books overall, but this one was just about like figuring out what you want to do in life, but also like allowing yourself to take breaks, about burnout. I really loved it. It was so good. It just really stuck home with me. Of course, Kate O'Neill's illustrations are gorgeous and everything, but I loved their story as well. this really worked for me. The next book I have on here, or graphic novel I have on here, taking up my number 6 spot, is The Magic Fish by Chung Lee Nguyen, and this is about a young boy who is trying to come out to his mom as gay, but also just telling these stories with his mom. They tell stories together, and him maybe trying to tell himself through these stories, and it's just, oh, it's such a beautiful novel, and by the end I was like tearing up a little bit. So it definitely is a memorable comic book, and I love the illustrations. Highly recommend this. Again, another really great graphic novel. Taking up my number 5th spot, I have The Truth of the Divine by Lindsay Ellis, and this I gave a 4.5 stars to. This book was a lot, but it was amazing. And in the first book, this alien and this, young 20-something-year-old have to like come together and like kind of join forces to defeat the evil aliens, I guess. And the second book is like kind of following the aftermath of the first book, and it is intense. It is a lot, but it is really completely nuanced. There are a lot of trigger warnings. The main character is dealing a lot with PTSD. It's pretty intense. I would definitely look at the content warnings again for this book. Ooh, it was good. The depth the characters had, the nuance, the struggles they were going through. It was so well done, and I really love this book. It stuck in my brain, especially with comparison to the first book. The first book is so fun, it's so accessible, it's like an alien buddy cop almost kind of story, and then you go into this book and it's just like, oh god, this is dark, this is a lot. It was good. It was really good. Taking up my number 4th spot, I have Dawn by Octavia Butler. I did a whole reading challenge where I read Octavia Butler books, and then I went back and read more Octavia Butler, and I'm kind of obsessed with her now. I love her stuff. Octavia Butler was a sci-fi speculative author, and she's kind of renowned for being like the mother of the Afrofuture genre, but also just like American sci-fi in contemporary times as well. She's written a lot of great books. I really enjoyed everything I read. I read the Kindred book, and I read the Parable of the Sower series, but Dawn, I don't know what it was about Dawn. It just stuck out to me so intensely. I gave this book 4 stars, so it wasn't like a perfect read for me. I have to read the entire series next year because this book, I read a lot of alien sci-fi books, and honestly, I really enjoyed all of them. I thought I wouldn't like this topic, but I guess I do. But if you don't know, Dawn is about this young woman who basically wakes up in a spaceship, doesn't know where she is, and the aliens, come in and are like, we have this task for you. You have to help integrate humans back on Earth because we basically saved a bunch of you when the Earth was dying, and now it's like a toxic wasteland jungle, and you're gonna have to survive there. And we're going to help teach you how to live there. Oh, it's so good. I think that this would make a great series, like a Squid Game kind of like series, like on Netflix or something. It really does have that much potential. It's intense. It has a lot of really deep, nuanced discussions, and it's really good. It's so good. I just want everybody to read Octavia Butler, and this just happened to be my favorite of what I read, and it just stuck in my brain. It's stuck in my brain. I think about this book a lot. Taking up my number 3 spot, I have In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. This is a book that's like starts as a middle grade and transitions into a YA, if that makes sense. It is following a young boy through his life from the time he's like 12 to 17, 18, and it's like every year of him going to this like magical school in this fantasy world, and it's him connecting with his friends and other kids there, and it's basically just him being a bisexual disaster at all points in time. He is just a little gremlin who tells it like it is, and he is so funny. This book was hilarious. This book was so fun to read. It's definitely having a commentary on like those kind of like chosen one stories, but I think it just does such a great job of those discussions. This book left me wanting more. It left me wanting to read fanfics of the characters. So like that's where we're at. That's how good it was. I just love this. It was so charming, and the characters have just really stuck with me. This just felt different than so many other YA fantasies. It just was doing its own thing in its own style, in its own format, and I loved it. It felt so refreshing. Taking up my number 2 spot, we have a series, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet series by Becky Chambers. I don't think that's the name of the series. title, but it's fine. You know what I'm talking about. So I read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, I read A Close and Common Orbit, and I read the third book, which is A Record of a Spaceborne Few. So I have one more book in the series to read, and I fell in love with this series, and I fell in love with Becky Chambers, and I fell in love with this hope punk or hope core sci-fi, whatever it's called. Basically, this series is these disconnected companion novels about this particular, like, space setting where there are a bunch of aliens and humans interacting, living in different ways with each other. The first book is about a, like, mining spacecraft and their adventures. The second book is about a, like, AI robot trying to blend in with humans. And the third book is about one of the last surviving spacecrafts that Earthens have lived on since they escaped Earth. And I love this series. I will say the second book kind of sticks home to me as my favorite right now, just because it is a very, like, slow-moving, very slice of life. They're all very slice of life, but this one in particular is very slice of life, and I just loved that. But all these books are just basically day in the lives, you know, showing us the world, showing us the characters growing and changing. This is the kind of sci-fi I love. I love this. It is so good. I want to read everything Becky Chambers has written, and I want to finish this series in the coming year. It is perfect. And finally, finishing off my favorite books of 2021, we're going to end with, again, another series, and that is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Nothing can compete with this series, nothing. It is so mind-blowingly good. I am obsessed. I'm in love. If I was going to give only one series, one book, 5 stars, it would be this series. I could easily give everybody else a 4-star because they could not compare to this thing. The Broken Earth Trilogy is basically this, like, sci-fi fantasy-ish world in the future. It's, like, past the point where humans have destroyed themselves so many times that we're basically, like, back to living in, like, medieval-ish times, kind of. I don't want to say medieval because it's not medieval themed, if that makes sense, but it feels very, like, feudal system-y. It feels like Bronze Age almost. I don't know how to explain it. In this very particular setting, the Earth is, like, basically trying to destroy the world, and so there's earthquakes, there's hurricanes, there's natural disasters, and in this world there are people that can use orogeny, which is basically harness the energy of the Earth to do certain powerful things. And these people are oppressed, they are forced into servitude or slavery to perform these acts for the kingdoms. And our first book is following a couple different narrators at different ages in their life, kind of trying to survive. And the main perspective is this not young, but like mid-aged woman has discovered that one of her children has died, has been murdered, and she has to figure out where her other child is. The other thing that's happening while that is going on is that a season has started, and a 5th season, is basically like a bunch of catastrophic events are going to happen. It could be plagues, it could be invasive species, it could be all these horrible things. And basically what each little town does is they shut down and isolate themselves so that they can survive. And so, like, this is not the time for her to be, like, running after a child into the wilderness to try and find where her husband and her second child went. This series is amazing. What it does with perspective, what it does with plot. Oh, just chef kiss. It's so good, it's so well written, it's so mind-bogglingly amazing, and I can't get over it. I love it. I love this book, I love this series. It is like my favorite thing ever, and it's perfect. It is perfect. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's one of those books you can reread and find something new every time, and I'm so excited to eventually in the future reread it. It's definitely in my top favorite books of all time. It is that good. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. But to kind of wrap this up, let's not do statistics necessarily, but let's kind of look at what I read. My favorites, I have 2 comic books. 5 of my books were adult, and 5 of them were YA. And 7 of them were fantasy, sci-fi, or had some kind of fantastical element. So definitely adult sci-fi and fantasy seemed to be my go-to genre of the year. It was my, like, top 2 books of the year, my top 2 series of the year. And while YA is not my go-to anymore, I would say, it still manages to be up there. And it's no surprise that 8 of my books were queer in some respect. So yeah, that's what I like now, I guess. Queer adult sci-fi. Yay. But I've waxed on and on about my favorite books of the year, but I would love to know what your favorite reads of 2021 were. Did you read anything that blew your mind, that changed your world? Let me know. I need some more books like that. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.